So as promised, I am finally doing my favorite books of 2015. But before you watch this video, make sure you go watch my last video, which was all the books I read in 2015. I just quickly went over all the books I read, so then you can see what of those books that I read last year actually made it into my favorites. There's about 12 books I have. I couldn't quite get it up to 15 books because I wanted to do like my top 15 of 2015, but there weren't quite 15 books, but kind of more favorites than 15. You'll see what I mean when we actually get into the video, which we should just get into now. Also, like, you know, some of these books, it's been a year since I read, or a while since I've read them, so I'll try to, I hope I can actually remember more than just like, it was good, so we'll see. Oh, and these are in chronological order, starting from my least favorite of my favorites down to my absolute favorite book that I read in the year of 2015, which I think some of you guys might be able to guess what that was based on some of my videos from last year. Take a guess. Put down in the comments before I get to number 1 what you think my favorite book of last year was, and then see if you're right. So anyways, the first book on my list, my least favorite of my favorites, I'm being so redundant, sorry, is Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. This was the first Morgan Matson book I ever read. Actually, it's kind of funny, I had read Katie Finn before this, which is another pen name for Morgan Matson. So I read that book of hers first before I read any of her other books by Morgan Matson. And I just think it's funny because most people obviously had read Morgan Matson before they read Katie Finn, and I read Katie Finn because they like Morgan Matson. Okay, I'm rambling on, sorry. This is my first Morgan Matson book and I really love this. This is a contemporary book about this girl named Sloane, and her best friend disappears over the summer and leaves her with this list of things to do because she's not really adventurous or anything. It's been a while since I read this, so honestly I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I really love this book. It was a really fun, summery, contemporary book, and I was reading it in like May or June. You know, it was like a perfect time to read this book, and I think that was one of the reasons why I loved it so much. The writing in this book is so great, and just like the development that Sloane goes through as a character and everything was really great, and I just think Morgan Matson is a fantastic contemporary writer. Then we have Free to Fall by Lauren Miller. This is a hard book to explain because also, again, I don't remember all of what happened in this book. But it's like a weird science fiction book, and it's like about how this app like does everything for you. Like everyone uses this app to ask everything, like what should I have for breakfast? What school should I go to? Like big and small decisions. Who should I marry? Like all that crazy stuff. And this girl ends up getting a scholarship to this school, and it's like all this mystery stuff. It's like a sci-fi and a mystery because you're like, whoa, what's going on? And at the end, when everything comes together and you find out how everything went, it was crazy. I was not expecting this book to be what it was because I was just like, okay, cool sci-fi book, but it was kind of like a thriller mystery too. It was really cool. It was really well written. I'd previously read one of Lauren Miller's other books and really liked it. Her writing is great, and yeah, this was just a really cool book. The next book is actually the only book in this whole list that I did not give a 5-star to. So you're probably like, well, why is it on your list? And I'll explain that now. So that book is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jessie Andrews, but I did give this book a 4.5, so that's still a really, really good rating. This book was just a breath of fresh air, I think, in the contemporary genre for me. The writing style of this was amazing and so quirky at the same time. Greg, who is the narrator of this book, is just a very relatable character, and he has such this funny like wit, and he just has this really great way of describing the situations that he's in to him and his friends, and it just reads like something that would actually happen. And I really, really enjoyed this book, which is funny why I never saw the movie. I really need to see the movie. I've been wanting to see the movie for a while. The next book is not a book, but 2 books. They are part of a series, so I'm just kind of lumping them together, especially because I read them like only a couple months apart. And those are the first 2 books in the Firebird series by Claudia Gray, which is 1,000 Pieces of You and 10,000 Skies Above You. I'm just gonna hold this one up for now because it's prettier than this one, and this one's an arc, so yeah. So this is again a hard book to kind of describe. So what I love so much about this series is the whole premise and aspect of it. It's really cool. It's about like not time travel, but it's traveling through different parallel universes, dimensions, and how there's like literally millions and millions and millions upon millions of these throughout the world. It's any time you could have made a different decision that led to a different parallel universe. So, you know, if you were debating between two colleges and you went to one and not the other, those are two different universes. Where you went to the other one you didn't choose, and you know, there's a parallel universe for when Hitler won the war, not the Allies. So that was just super cool, and I really love the characters in it. Funny enough, Vampire Academy is one of my favorite books. One of the guys in this book reminded me so much of Dmitry Belikov, but not in a like, oh, she totally copied Rochelle Mead and her character, but just like in a really awesome way, because he's Russian and tall and kind of stoic, and I love Dmitry, so I was like, like seeing another guy like that in another book. And it's really written beautifully, and the story is just so interesting and captivating. It was something I read really quickly and in one sitting, and I loved the sequel just as much, and I'm super pumped for the last book. I think it's the last book at least. I'm pretty sure it's a trilogy, and that will be coming out later this fall. Okay, so JK about that whole thing, how I said I only had one book in this whole list that was not a 5-star. I had 2 books in this list that were not quite a 5-star, and that other book is Winter by Marissa Meyer. This I gave a 4.5 star to. You know, it could have been just the fact that I really had to push myself to read this, because even though I have been looking forward to this book for years, because I read Cinder right when it came out, and so this whole year I was looking forward to this book. When this came out, I was in a huge reading slump, but I really wanted to read it, so I really pushed myself into reading it. So that could be one of the reasons I didn't like it as much as I would have if I hadn't pushed myself to read it. But also, I think it was just a little too long. I mean, this book was like 800 pages, and all the other books I think were like 400, 500. They were a couple hundred pages less, especially towards like the middle and going towards the end. It just seemed to be a little slow at parts. There wasn't a whole lot going on, but it's supposed to be like, you know, building up to the climax, but even though it's supposed to be building up to the climax, it just seemed kind of slow. You know, it wasn't as fast as I would have wanted to be, which is why I couldn't quite get it to a 5-star rating. But I did think this was a great finale to the Lunar Chronicles, which has been one of my favorite series ever since I read Cinder. They're just really awesome books. They are all fairy tale retellings, and this one, in case you can't tell, is a retelling of Snow White. Very cool books, really well written. If you love fairy tales like Once Upon a Time or anything like that, you should definitely pick up this series, because it was an amazing series. I did love the finale, just not quite as much as the previous books, and I just wish it had been a little bit shorter, just so the action could have been a little faster and kept me a little bit more invested than I was. Next on my favorites of 2015 is a book that is completely different than all the other books in this list, because it is the only nonfiction book, and it's a memoir, and that is Rapture Practice by Erin Hartzler. This book is amazing. I did talk about this in my June wrap-up, I'm pretty sure it was. So if you want to know a little bit more about this book, I will leave a link to my June wrap-up down in the description, and like a little timestamp as to when I start talking about this book. But anyways, so yes, this is a memoir about this guy named Erin Hartzler, and it's about him growing up in a very evangelical household, and like coming to terms with like realizing that he's gay and kind of dealing with all that stuff. This was such a great book, but also a book that you're going to want to throw at the wall if you are anything like me, or you're pro-gay marriage or liberal. This book will just make you angry with all the bigotry in it, but so well written. And the thing is, you know, I don't really read much nonfiction, because I personally find nonfiction not that entertaining. But this book, even though all this stuff is true and everything, it reads like a novel. You feel like you're reading a novel. You don't feel like you're reading about someone's life that actually happened. You feel like you're just reading like another contemporary book, which is why I think this book is amazing and why I think everyone should read it. Next is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This was a debut fantasy dystopian-ish book that came out last year. and it was really, really good. It was getting a lot of hype everywhere, and I finally got around to reading it and really loved it. This book was really good. It was different than a lot of the other fantasy I had been reading lately, especially just the setting, because it takes place in what I imagine to kind of be like the Middle East, like kind of maybe Turkey or something. I don't know. It definitely has like Middle Eastern influence in it, which I find a really cool setting for a fantasy, dystopian, whatever you want to call a book. I guess this would be more fantasy than dystopian. I don't know why I'm calling it dystopian. And it was really well written. I really loved the characters, really connected with the characters. I really liked the story, which I'm kind of blanking on at the moment. And again, this was another book I talked about in one of my wrap-ups, so again, just click that down below. Because I'm sure the me of then remembers a lot more of what went on in this book than the me of now does. It was a really great fantasy book with great characters, and I'm super excited to read the sequel and see where everything goes that happened at the end of the last book. So I know this book was a lot higher on other people's favorites, so you're probably gonna be surprised that this book is not higher up on my list, especially because I know a lot of other people had this in like their #1 spot or just very high up on their list. But I read a lot of really great books last year that became some of my absolute favorites and just loved so much. But these last 5 books are all amazing. I love them all. It was kind of hard to put them in order, but some just loved them a little bit more. Next book is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series. I really did love this book. I can't really say anything about it because it'd be incredibly spoiling you for all the other previous books. The character in this is such a badass, but in this book and the last book, you kind of get to see her vulnerability and everything, which was nice, and you know, her relationships with these new characters and her really coming into herself. And I love the writing of this book. I love the world building. I just really love this series, and I love Sarah J. Maas. Next is the conclusion to one of my favorite series, which is the Ruby Circle by Richelle Mead. This is the last book in the Bloodline series. I love Bloodlines, and Richelle Mead is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I thought this was a great ending to the series. It could have been a little longer because it's pretty short, I think, especially compared to some of the other books in this series, but everything that I wanted to happen in this book happened. Sydney and Adrian and all those feels, and Dimitri and Rose are in it too, and it's just and a couple of things that I had kind of like really wanted to happen. I was like, ooh, I think this is gonna happen, and it made me really excited and really hoping that Richelle Mead at some point will continue on in the Vampire Academy world with a different series or something, because some of the stuff that happened at the end, I'm like, I need to know what happens like years from now, because yes, you know what I'm talking about if you've read this book too, yeah. So we have reached the top 3 of my favorite books of 2015. All these books were so good. Like last year, even though I didn't read as many books as I read the previous year, I found, I think, some of my favorite books just are amazing, and this is one of them, and that is another Sarah J. Maas book, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses. As much as I love the Throne of Glass series, I like this book better. Just a little bit better, because this would be classified, I think, more as a new adult book. It's like on the edge of young adult, new adult, so it's a little bit more mature than Throne of Glass. And this is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And obviously, because like Lunar Chronicles was in this video, I love retellings of fairy tales. I think they're so awesome when they're done well. And this one is done so well. Man, Sarah J. Maas is just like an amazing writer. This book was so good. I read through it. I was up till like 7 or 8 in the morning reading this. I could not put it down. It was so good. The romance in this was so good. I'm a sucker for romance. I think I said that now in like so many videos. And just, I love the retelling of this and how you could like see the elements of the classic Beauty and the Beast tale, but also there were things you weren't expecting that came about in the book, which I thought was really cool, and I'm so excited for the next book. So excited! Woo! I can't believe I read 2 of my favorite books of all time last year. That I just so happened to finally pick up these books that have been around for quite a while. and I don't know, but it made 2015 a great reading year. And this one was actually the very first book I picked up of last year. So the beginning of last year was a great start to my reading. And that book was The Bronze Horseman by Paulina Simons. Whew, this book, man, this book. So I read this in January of last year, right? I've already reread this book 2 or 3 times. Granted, like those 2 or 3 rereads, for I think most of those, I haven't reread like every single page. I kind of skipped around a bit to my favorite parts, but I have read the majority of this book. And this book is like 800 pages, so even if I just read like 600 of them, that's still a lot to be rereading. I love this book so much. Historical fiction is just one of my absolute favorite genres, especially when it comes to anything set in World War II, because I am a World War II fanatic. Give me any great book set in World War II and I will love it. And this book literally combines some of my all-time favorite things. It's a historical fiction, it's set in World War II, and it's a romance. Ugh, what a great romance book this is. I mean, it's not just a romance book, but that is the main thing of this book. And the reason I think why I love this book so much is it was set in a totally different part of World War II that I hadn't really read about. This book is actually set in Russia during World War II, and it's about this girl named Tatiana and her family, and this guy she meets, Alexander, end up being in Leningrad when the Germans took siege of the city for like over a year, and all these people died and starved to death, and some like living in it. So it's a very depressing book. It's a very heavy book. But then, you know, there's some great redeeming stuff towards the end, but then more heartbreak at the end, and just this book will give you all the feels. You'll be crying during this book, you'll be happy during this book. I mean, you'll probably be crying for a lot more of it than you'll be happy, but whew, this is an intense book. But I know most people are like, man, this took me a while to read. I read this on like a day and a half because I was like, I can't put this down, and then I immediately went out and bought the other books in the series. But this book is so good. It is instantly now one of my all-time favorite books. Like, not just my favorite books of 2015, like my all-time favorite books. This book, I would say, is in like my top 3 now. I imagine myself like at least once a year picking up and rereading this book. And you know, sometimes you just want to go back and read like your favorite scene of something, so it'll be multiple times during the year. I just love this book so much, and I'm so happy I found out about it through BookTube actually and read it, because just yes to this book. Oh, and sorry if my light is changing throughout the video. I'm having problems with this light thing where it seems to be like dimming slowly while I'm recording, which is really annoying. So switched out the batteries, hopefully it will stay now. So we are now at my #1 favorite book in the year 2015. Did you guess it? Final chances to put your guesses in right now. You ready? You ready? Let's see how many of you guys guessed this. I think a couple of you will. And that book is, well, it's a series, but I'm holding up one of the books. Harry Potter, of course. So I finally got around to reading Harry Potter last year, other than the last book, but I had already read that book. It's a long story. Go watch my I've Never Read Harry Potter video. Explains it all and my weird reading things when it came to Harry Potter. Anyways, I can't believe it took me so long to read this series because it was amazing. I'm really happy that we went to Wizarding World of Harry Potter last year, because if we hadn't, I don't know how much longer it would have taken me to read the series. I'm hoping I like would have read it, because I had this box set right here. I had this box set for 6-8 months before I actually started reading the books, and it was because I was like, oh, I want to read the books before I go to the Wizarding World in Orlando. I only read like the first 2. So I'm really happy we went, because it kicked my ass into gear into finally reading this series. And the reason I'm holding up Goblet of Fire is because this one was my favorite one that I've read so far. It's been a while since I read the 7th, so I'm not counting that in it. Who knows, that could become my favorite once I reread it 10 years later. This series, like, you guys already know. I'm sure most of you guys have read Harry Potter. You understand why this series is amazing and is #1 on my list. The movies were always a huge part of my childhood, and so finally getting around to reading the books, it was so magical for me. Like, just getting so much more in depth of the movies I love so much, and getting to know so much more about these characters that, while they were great in the movie, they were so much better in the book. Just just like it made my appreciation for the movies so much more, and then also made me hate some of the movies I used to love because I was like, what? Why? Harry Potter is just now one of my favorite series of all time. Like, I think it's everyone who has ever read this series. I need to actually finish really reading this series though and read the 7th book. Hopefully I will be doing that soon. No book really gives you this feeling. Like, if you didn't grow up with it, I don't know if you'd understand whether you grew up with the movies or the books, but it's just something that, you know, you read these books and it brings you to a happy place. You just feel like you're a kid again, and watching these movies or reading these books for the first time, it's so magical and just takes you back to those days, and I just get these warm fuzzy feelings whenever I think about Harry Potter, which is why I'm so excited for my new job. I've been dropping so many hints the past couple of days. If you haven't figured out what it is yet, come on. These books are just amazing. So happy I finally read them. Just need to get to the 7th book, then I can say I finally read through the whole series. And yeah, so, you know, what else could be my number one when I read Harry Potter for the first time last year? I don't think anything could. So those were all my favorite books that I read in the year of 2015. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book was that you read in the year of 2015. Like I said, mine is just the whole Harry Potter series, because you can't really say one, but if I had to, I'd say Goblet of Fire. I want to know what your favorite book of the year 2015 is. It'd be interesting to see if one of my books that's in this list is on yours, and if there is a book I never heard of or read that was one of your favorites. I want to know. Get some new books on my to be read list this year. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up, and if you are not already subscribed to my channel, what are you doing? Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. See you guys next time. I don't know what I'm doing. Bye bye.